Aftermath, Unforeseen Side Effects. What is up, everybody? Thomas greeted cheerfully, eager to start on this episode. It had been a while, and this was going to be just a quick update. Probably a 10-minute video, if they even got that far. Guys, I want to thank you all for being so understanding about my break. Your support and even the stern reminders to take care of myself were so important to me. And because you've been asking, I feel pretty okay. And I'm not just saying that. I have been sleeping well, and I feel motivated to get back in the saddle. And that's a relief, honestly. I was a little worried after... Thomas couldn't help but think back to the chaos of his last meeting with the sides. That definitely could have gone better. He shook himself out of those thoughts. No point dwelling on them. All he could do was move forward with what he had and make the best of it. And on that note, just to be sure, Logan? He called out as he turned to the staircase, where his logical sides rose up. He was holding a notebook and pencil in his hands and a dictionary under his arm. He looked up from his notes in surprise. Then his eyes settled on Thomas and he vanished the books and pen. "Oh, Thomas," he greeted as he readjusted his tie, which sat looser around his neck than usual. "Apologies, I didn't expect to be needed today. There was no video scheduled last time I checked." Logan explained a little confused. Thomas nodded in understanding. It wasn't planned exactly. He just suddenly felt like talking to the others and decided to record his side of the conversation, should he be able to make it into an actual video with Joan later. "You're right, but I thought it would be a good idea to check in on you guys. You know, see if there's any problems before it becomes a crisis," he tried to explain. Logan nodded, but still looked confused. He glanced around at the rest of the room before looking back at Thomas. "And you came to me first?" he asked. Thomas flinched at that. Poor Logan. He didn't say it, but clearly he still felt hurt about not being listened to. "Well..." Thomas hesitated as he looked for the words to explain his reasoning. It's true that he had rarely consciously chosen to turn to Logan first for advice. Today, however, it had felt right. But just saying something felt right would mean little to nothing to Logan. Getting an objective perspective first seemed like a good idea. Thomas started nervously, but then stopped abruptly as he caught himself in a second guessing. He shook his head firmly and shut his eyes to refocus. No, he wasn't going to start with this today. It is a good idea. It'll give me something to grind myself with if the others turn out to be overwhelming. He then turned his full attention to Logan, wanting to make the next part really stick. "You give me stability and direction when it all becomes too much. You are important to me, even if I don't always show it. I'm really glad to have you to make sense of everything when I don't even understand myself." Logan blinked a few times as he let that passionate outburst sink in for a minute. That was... "Thomas, thank you for saying that," he said gently, a warm smile on his face. "I'm sorry it took me so long to say out loud. I really mean it. The others can be very loud, intentionally or not, and I should have made it more of an effort to give you your chance to speak." Logan knew that the others didn't always mean to ignore him. They'd often come to him and apologize afterwards, and sometimes even during debates for their actions. But to hear Thomas acknowledge that his emotions, fears and passions could sometimes make it hard for logic to come through clearly, and if Thomas was truly intending to make an effort to let him be heard in the future, then that meant everything to him. But because he didn't know how to explain this to Thomas, he moved on to the matter at hand. He cleared his throat, straightened his tie once more, and adjusted his glasses before addressing his host again, with a professional disposition this time. "Well, objectively speaking, the time off has done you a real benefit. You are on a better sleeping and eating schedule, and while a few projects have been pushed back, you seem better equipped to take them on than before the break. On the whole, I'd say you are doing the best you have been in a long time in regards to your physical and mental health." Thomas was beaming when he heard that. "I thought so too, but it's still nice to hear it from you. By the way, what were you doing when I called you?" he asked curiously. Oh, I was designing a crossword for the Sanderside's puzzle book, in case you and Joan actually make one. Logan explained. Thomas' eyes widened in interest. Really? That is awesome! He exclaimed eagerly. The Fenders would definitely lose their minds. Logan nodded. It is quite an interesting challenge to undertake, I must say, he confirmed. Well, in that case, let's call the others so you can get back to that, Thomas suggested before turning to the window and calling for the parental side. Patton? Upon his summons, not one, but two sides showed up. Oh, hey Janice, Thomas greeted, a little nervous. He wasn't used to the Serpentine side yet, and he was all too aware that Janice might have good intentions, but his way wasn't always the right way. Hello, Thomas, Janice drawled, a little apprehensive. Any reason you came up with Pat? I would have called you up next, Thomas assured him. A smile tugged at the human side of Jan's mouth when he sensed truth in that statement. Patton was the one who answered. Janice was helping me pick out the best patent puns, misleading compliments, and tips for my text bubbles in the Sanderside's puzzle book. As Patton spoke, the puzzle book took a clear form in Thomas's mind. A collection of puzzles designed by each of his sides with little comics and chibi figurines of them communicating directly with the Fenders. The idea had come up during a live stream a while ago, but he and Joe never got around to it. That was clearly about to change. That's amazing! I'm almost sorry I interrupted you all. Once more Thomas stopped himself before he could second-guess his decision. It'd be only a few more minutes, and then they could all go back to their projects. Anyway, how are you two doing? This whole deal was a big change for both of you. Well, for everyone really, but Thomas wasn't ready to acknowledge the two sides that might struggle with this change the most just yet. The mere memory of Prince's face when he sank out still broke his heart. That had been a difficult bit to reenact with Joan. Janice and Patton exchanged a look before glancing over at Logan. The logical side studied their host for a minute and then nodded at the two others, agreeing that there was something different about him. His tone, his demeanor, no one knew what or how, but the change was clearly there. It wasn't a bad change, but still, choosing to brush this aside as a consequence of proper self-care, Janice moved in to reassure Thomas. We are all getting along famously, Thomas. Their charge gave the side of deception a doubtful once-over before looking over at Patton, who already squirmed under his gaze. Pat, he pressed. Patton sighed deeply. He didn't want to worry Thomas, but he'd also promised to acknowledge it when he was feeling bad. Well, it hasn't been easy exactly, he admits. We are still learning to get along and, well... Patton took off his glasses to clean them and give himself a second to take a breath. I believe Patton is referring to Roman and Virgil's solid opinion on working with Janice. Logan suggested, earning a grateful smile from Patton. I feared as much, Thomas muttered. Virgil hasn't exactly said he isn't okay with Janice sticking around, Patton clarified. He's just not going to trust me anywhere near Roman anytime soon, Janice huffed, still a little hurt by that. And Roman doesn't really want to talk to either of us at the moment, Patton added, gesturing between himself and Janice. I haven't even seen either of them for days, and I get that any time, but I'm starting to worry. It was clear that Patton was torn up about this. Well, if it helps, I've been feeling quite creative lately, and I'm not more or less anxious than normal. Thomas gestured to his properly groomed and alert appearance to underline the last point. Patton nodded as Thomas spoke, still wringing his hands nervously. Well, at least they haven't ducked out. That's something, he muttered. Thomas frowned, a little worried, and then his face lit up as he got an idea. Well, I guess we could push them just a little. I was going to call them up soon anyway. Who first? Thomas asked. Virgil, Janice blurted out, unable to maintain his composure. He tried everything he could think of to talk to Virgil since being allowed upstairs, and nothing had worked. This way Virgil would have to be in the same room as him for at least a little while. Logan shifted a little uncomfortable. The last time he'd seen Virgil and Roman, the anxious side had still seemed guarded and protective of the fanciful prince. He wasn't sure if pushing them, even a little, was wise. At the very least, they should get a proper warning. "All right," Thomas exclaimed as he turned towards the stairs. "Do I speak up or not?" Logan wondered. Thomas locked eyes with him for a brief second as if waiting for him to give him the okay, and Logan did. Emotions weren't his strong point. Patton may be compromised in this aspect at the moment, but he'd still speak up if this was a bad idea. Right? Thomas nodded and continued with a dramatic introduction. "One anxious, protective emo boy coming right up." He took a deep breath and called out, "Hey Virgil, everything seems fine up here. Want to tell me what we're forgetting about?" Everyone braced for Virgil's usual sudden appearance, but instead a little origami crane fluttered from the stairs into Logan's waiting hand. What's that?" Thomas asked, confused, as Logan opened the bird up and read. "Virgil is unavailable at the moment, but he wants me to let you all know that while he feels a bit tense about the delayed project, getting reassurance from your friends and defenders over the past week makes it more manageable." Thomas frowned, confused. While it was nice to hear that Virgil was doing fine for once, it wasn't like him to just sit a discussion out when he was invited. Or was he still hung up about the reveal that he used to be a dark side? Well, if Virgil and Roman had been spending time together, maybe his inner prince knew how the youngest of his traits was doing. "Okay, well, Roman, I'd like to talk with you about all those wonderful ideas you've been giving me." No matter how upset Roman was, there was no way he'd resist the opportunity to gush about his project ideas. The Shira-themed cartoon therapy, the magical girl wheel or fake anime. But nothing happened. "Roman," Logan called out, "we require your assistance. Something is wrong with Virgil, and you are the only one who can help." The chance to be a hero should have worked even better. But still nothing happened. "Roman!" Patton screeched, distressed, yet it still did nothing. "This isn't funny anymore, Roman," Janice scolded, though he too looked worried. "Come up and say your piece. Yell if you must." Nothing. Now everyone was calling for the two sides at once until finally... "Hi!" Everyone jumped and Patton and Thomas couldn't help their screams at Remus's unexpected appearance. Oddly enough, the darker creative side was covered in paint, both dark and bright, and he was wearing a flower crown of forget-me-nots and buttercups. Hey Remus, how are you?" Thomas asked timidly. He'd planned to have all his other sides with him before calling for Remus. "Splendid! I haven't had this much fun in ages," Remus gushed. "This fun wouldn't have anything to do with why your brother and Virgil aren't responding, would it?" Janice asked, dread already twisting in his stomach. Remus was oblivious to everyone's unease. "Oh, it has everything to do with that," he replied eagerly. "Remus!" Patton exclaimed, appalled. "I thought you were getting along with them." Remus cocked his head curiously, but the excited grin didn't falter for a second. "I am! All that playing around in the imagination has made us closer than ever. But not as close as them," he giggled. "Talk about being joined at the hip!" "Remus, what did you do?" Logan demanded, fed up with the troubling implications of everything Remus said. Remus fell silent and looked around at their worried and shocked faces, confused for a moment. Then a light bulb seemed to go off. "Oh!" he exclaimed as he burst out laughing, clutching his stomach as he tried to speak. "You all think I glued their butts together!" He tries and fails to compose himself a few times, but eventually tones his fit down to a few chuckles as he wipes the mud from his eyes. "That would be hilarious, but not nearly as fun as what they really did." The others waited for him to elaborate for a moment. When it seemed like he wouldn't, Thomas stepped in. "And what did they do exactly?" Remus opened his mouth, but then giggled as his face lit up with excitement. He jumped up and down and clapped his hands, eager for whatever he had thought of. "See for yourself! Think of winning an award, reading a nice comment, looking at fan art or cosplays." Everyone looked confused. "That's not how I get to Virgil's room," Thomas muttered, a little reluctant to go with an idea Remus came up with, even if it seemed harmless. "Our romance," Patton added. "And definitely not yours," Janice scoffed.
Just do it already,
Genus whined impatiently. Thomas looked at Logan. Virgil didn't duck out. No matter what's going on, he'd stop us if this was a bad idea. Like how he tried to warn us off from going to Patton's last time. Right? Logan nodded along with Thomas' reasoning. Virgil would most definitely find a way to at least have his concerns be noted. "Do you feel anxious about following Remus's instructions?" Logan asked with a gesture to the Duke, who was now impatiently tapping his foot, arms crossed across his chest. "Well, yes, but not in a bad way. It feels like first day of class, nurse, I think. Just a general fear of the unknown, not a I will definitely get murdered in this alley kind of dread." "In that case, I'd say go ahead." And with that rational incentive, Thomas took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and visualized the final bow after his premiere performance in Into the Woods. The celebratory squeals when his Vine account started to get traction, when he got recognized by a stranger for the first time, when Sender Sides became a success. All those triumphs that gave him that same strange combination of adrenaline and peacefulness. As he focused, his other sides sank down one by one until he too found himself, well, in his living room, but a very messy version of it. Everywhere around him were books, binders filled with sketches, and notebooks. But above all, there were post-its everywhere, in a literal rainbow of colors. And then there were the letters fluttering around, folded in different shapes. Patton eagerly caught a fluttering heart and cooed as he read.
"Aw, you guys!
He gushed with a hand to his heart.
Listen to this. We appreciate everything you do to make us feel important. Just let us help you too, Pops. Pretty please? That's so sweet."
Patton sighed as tears shimmered in his eyes. He didn't know how much he needed to have someone tell him this until the words were right in front of him. Logan, intrigued, caught one of the origami cranes flying around near his corner and couldn't help but smile as he read it. "We're impatient airheads sometimes. Thanks for putting up with all of us, Teach." Janice still remained skeptical of the fortune tellers that seemed to be trying to get his attention. Thomas was much more eager to catch and open one of his paper planes. Every part of you has a not-so-secret, goofy, soft baby side to them. That means you are a wholesome little puffball. Deal with it, you Hufflepuff. Those words were surprisingly comforting. It was true. Even Remus was accepted and loved by the Fenders the second he was introduced. He was okay. With all his flaws out in the open, the fans, his friends and family still loved and accepted him the way he is. It's a bit aggressive, but sweet. He chuckled. Blunt was probably the best word to describe the overall tone of these notes. A wad of paper came out of nowhere and hit Remus in the face. "I take it back. That was aggressive," Thomas chuckled, as Remus squealed and turned around the paper for all to see.
"You stink!"
Finally, Janus gave in to his own curiosity and snatched up the fortune teller. "Change isn't easy. You deserve credit for your effort, but trust is never easy to give. Please be patient." It was a hard truth, one he swore he acknowledged, but knowing that whoever wrote this saw his effort, appreciated it, and asked him for time to give what he was seeking to gain, it threw him off so bad, and it still answered exactly 0 questions. "This is all very sweet and all," he snapped as he pretended to toss the paper over his shoulder, but performed some sleight of hand to tuck it in his pocket for later. "But where?" Suddenly he was stopped by a noise coming from upstairs. Someone was moving around in the bedroom. They all looked up confused. "Ree? Is that you?" It wasn't grand enough to be Roman, and not done enough to be Virgil. So who was it? Thomas looked at his sides, but they seemed as clueless as him. Well, all except Remus. He was beaming.
"The one and only cousin dearest,"
he sing-songed.
"Cousin?"
Thomas mouthed, looking at the others, who once again had no idea what was going on. A good-natured sigh drifted down the stairs, followed by an affectionate chuckle. "What's going on up there? Did they need something?" The mystery voice asked almost absent-mindedly.
"Thomas wants to know how we're all doing,"
Remus declared. anticipation clear on his face. "Shoot!" the voice exclaimed. "That was supposed to be a reminder for later." They could hear hurried steps and things being knocked over until a figure appeared on top of the stairs. "On a scale of 1 to 10, how worried are they?" the figure asked as he rushed down, not stopping until he was at Virgil's step, the one he sat on in that first video. Then he finally grabbed the banister, eyes locking on Remus's figure first, but then catching sight of the other visitors. "Oh, so 11. He chuckled awkwardly. Everyone stared at the stranger in awe. Clearly the man was a sight, but none of them had ever seen him before. His hair was longer and pulled back in a ponytail on top of his head. Now a single rebellious lock had escaped the hairband's hold. Magenta strands contrasted against the brown and matched the comfortable cotton shirt. Night blue denim overalls were covered with splashes of paint, the pockets filled with pencils and brushes and other craft supplies. Around his neck the man wore a flower chain made of wilted marigolds and daisies. Then suddenly the man looked down at his own appearances before looking at Remus with a playful pout. "Why didn't you warn me? I would have made myself presentable." The sight snapped his fingers and disappeared for an instant, only to reappear between the stairs and Remus. He wore light blue jeans, and what on first glance appeared to be a gorgeous magenta vest that splits at his waist and reached until just past his hips. But on a closer inspection, one could see that it actually was a sweater with a zipper in the front. The arts and craft supplies were sorted in a shoulder bag that looked like leather but wasn't. Over his heart the sight wore an emblem that reminded of Romans but was different. The outlines were stitched in silver instead of gold. The sunny sky held some rain clouds and a rainbow. The sight gave Thomas a light bow. "The name is Alexander. It's a true honor to make all of your acquaintances. Forgive me the mess. I've been rather busy the last few days," he explained politely. Hi. That's all right. Sorry for asking, but what are you exactly?" Thomas asked. It was all very confusing. All he'd wanted was to make sure Roman and Virgil were all right, and now here he was meeting Alexander instead. And he seemed really nice, honestly, but this wasn't what he had signed up for when he started filming. Alexander chuckled and gestured around. "You mean you have no idea?" he asked.
"I'm really sorry, kiddo. Normally I'd love to welcome you to the family and play games all day. But we're missing two very important friends."
Patton probably intended to say more, but Alexander interrupted him. "Roman and Virgil are fine," he promised as he looked over to Remus. "You told them nothing?" "Really?" he asked, a little exasperated. Remus shrugged.
"What would be the fun about that?"
he retorted. Alexander sighs and turns back towards Patton. "I'm sorry if he worried you. Your friends will be back soon." At that statement, Alexander took in the room and sighed. "Still so much work," he muttered as he picked up a notebook and started scribbling away, muttering to himself as he did so. Trying to make sense of the situation, the other sides inspected their corners. Logan found several textbooks surrounding him. Sign language, Greek mythology, developmental psychology. Logan reads from the spines of a few of them. "I was thinking about taking those classes," Thomas muttered, surprised. Patton found piles of booklets filled with contact information of all Thomas's friends and family. Some had notes added to them, urging Thomas to reach out to them. All of those had one thing in common. "I really missed them," Thomas sighed in realization when Patton showed him a few marked names. Janice found self-care notes. Some small things, like tasks that couldn't be put off any longer and would take off a lot of pressure once completed. Then there were bigger ones, like the all-caps reminder to "call a damn therapist, you martyr."
"Thomas, I've got some mushy stuff for you too,"
Remus giggled as he tossed over some flyers. Support local community theater, local parties, exciting outings to do with friends. Thomas looked through the files. Some seemed like they screamed Roman, but the haunted house challenge with Joan seemed more up Remus's alley. Still, what did all of this say about who Alexander was to him? "Are you my ambitions?" Thomas asked, unsure. That didn't seem to fit quite right. Besides, isn't that Roman's thing? Alexander paused as he put the notebook away. Well, not exactly. Woman is everything you hope and dream of. Your ideal self, your ideal life. I am more realistic. I know your limits as a human being. Your flaws and the flaws of the world we live in that prevent those ideals from becoming a reality. Woman wants you to be an honest man, because that's who you want to be. I know that that is impossible. Just to name one example. If any other side had called Thomas flawed and dishonest, even in those exact words, it would have made Thomas want to curl up under a blanket and berate himself. But Alexander was so non-judgmental about it. You said you see limits, but isn't that Virgil's job? He is always telling us to lower our expectations, Patton piped up, still confused. Alexander giggled. You're getting there, he grinned encouragingly. None of this makes sense, Logan snapped, frustrated at the lack of clear answers. I've been in contact with both Virgil and Roman as recent as 10 minutes ago. How can they be gone? And how can a brand new side appear without any of us noticing? Alex flinched at Logan's outburst. Then he took the logical side in with concerned eyes. Are you alright? Do you need a minute to sit down? He suggested. You look really stressed. Logan bristled and shook his head. I need answers, he insisted. Alex nodded with a sigh. Fair enough. I'm sorry if you feel like I deceived you. I probably should have realized you'd assume the notes came from Roman and Virgil. I've been a bit all over the place since I formed, as you can tell, I'm sure. Still, I should have thought to introduce myself properly sooner. A shiver went through Alex and his form glitched, making everyone tense in alarm. For a moment the magenta became purple, and Thomas could swear he saw a red sash blink in and out of existence. What did you do to my kids? Patton demanded harshly, clearly on his last nerve. Janice looked ready to fight someone as well. Logan was merely astonished as understanding dawned on both his and Thomas's faces. Alex threw up his hands defensively and glitched again. Remus took a protective stance, summoning his morning star and facing Patton and Janice. Leave my baby cousin alone. He's only a few days old, he demanded. It's all right, Remus. I'm not tuning out just yet. Alex assured the chaotic side of creativity before addressing the others. I'm what happens when doubts are lifted by hope, when dreams are grounded by reality, when anxiety and your inner prince are truly in sync. I am who will tell you when you can and cannot do something, when you should put in the extra effort and when you already have enough to deal with, when you should play it safe and when taking a chance is worth it, even if you fail. Alexander took a deep breath and straightened his posture. I am confident, and I am moments away from falling apart at all times. So please, I know I won't last long, but try not to speed things up. As you can see, he made a gesture that caused the post-its to fly up and surround him in a kaleidoscope of ideas and reminders. I still have to file all of this away for Virgil and Roman to sort through later. With that, he starts to divide the pieces of paper in 3 boxes that appeared at his summons, each labeled with a round sticker. 1 red, 1 purple, and 1 magenta. Remus danced around his cousin and grabbed at the green notes, babbling excitedly. Alexander nodded along and replied patiently, occasionally scribbling something down and adding it to the boxes. So, fusion is a thing? Thomas asked, astonished. Evidently, Logan nodded. Unprecedented, but possible. But Thomas has been confident before, right? Patton frowned, confused. So why are we only meeting you now? Because until recently Thomas wasn't comfortable with the existence of his dark aspects. Now that he is, I can take a somewhat stable form. When I'm not here, Roman and Virgil can still allow for confidence to exist. Right now, that collaboration is just a lot smoother. But Thomas started hesitantly, unsure if he is about to say something insensitive or not. When Alexander looks up at him with interest, he pushes through. Aren't you scared of when this passes? Alex smiles at his host sadly. Yes and no, he confesses to everyone's surprise. Such an answer wouldn't come easily to any of them. It would feel like weakness, like failure. And yet, Alex stated it as simple fact. I love existing, and now that I met you all, I'd love to spend time with you and just hang out, figure out more about myself. But I'm afraid I might never exist this long again, so I have to get as much work done as possible. That's why I didn't come to all of you the second I opened my eyes. That, and I got sidetracked, he chuckled. Why, no, Janice pressed, not sure what could be reassuring in the uncertain world Alexander lived in. It's in my nature to accept what can be changed, and I know Thomas is in good hands when I'm not here. He turned directly to Thomas then. I am so proud of you, Thomas. Strangely, this didn't make Thomas feel awkward or flustered. All he felt was a soothing warmth blooming in his chest. He could see that the others were affected by this as well, and Patton made a whining sound as he fought against his desire to run and hug the fusion.
Oh, enough meshiness!
Remus exclaimed impatiently.
Let's get back to work, Gus,
he whined. Alex chuckled. All right, keep your hair on, he teased, to which Remus grinned and tore out a large chunk of hair without breaking eye contact with Alex. Thomas and Patton flinched at the sight. Why? Thomas pleaded. The question was meant for Remus, but Alex answered as the Duke smoothed out his hair, which was already back to normal. You have to let him have fun his way every once in a while, especially when he comes to your defense.
Well, what would your daddy said if they heard I didn't look out for you?
Remus shrugged, as he and Alexander returned their attention to their work.
Wait, does this mean I'm a granddad?
Patton squealed. Janice had a similar thought, but he still wasn't sure about where he stood with Virgil, let alone with his sort of son. Patton, you're not really... Thomas was interrupted by Logan. Well, technically, Thomas, Patton and Virgil has as close of an approximation to a biological father-son bond as any of us can have. They are as much father and son as the twins are brothers. Thomas was clearly confused by this. Patton sighed and smiled sadly as he recalled the day that had marked the first big change in the mindscape since the appearance of the king.
It happened when Mr. Bubbles died. Suddenly I realized how scary and dangerous the world can be, and it became too much. I couldn't handle being your morality, feelings, and looking out for everything that could go wrong. So fear was born from me. Around middle school, he moved in with Janice and changed his title to anxiety,
Patton explained. Even ignoring that, adoptive parents are still parents and grandparents, even if things aren't going great, Alexander pointed out casually, and Janice knew that that bit was mainly meant for him, and it made him feel a little better. Suddenly, Alexander snapped his fingers, and in his place stood Gavin. Uncle Remus, can I have a piggyback ride? He sing-songed jokingly. Remus laughed hysterically.
How can I say no to my favorite cousin?
He grinned as he picked up the boy and carried him around, letting him grab at notes as they went, laughing all the while. When Remus put him down, he got that strangely serious expression.
In case this is my last shot, I'll miss you.
Kid Alex smiled comfortingly. My room is here even if I am not. It's not exactly the same, but until we meet again.
That's not what he means,
Patton exclaimed.
You are something wonderful, and it's unfair that we can't have you with us without sacrificing your dad. They'll never even get to meet you and see what an amazing person they made.
He quite devastated. Alex smiled and opened his arms. Want a hug, Papa Patton? Patton nodded briskly. Please, and ran over, wrapping the little guy in his arms. You tell them for me, Gavin, Alex, told Patton, and bring them here every once in a while. You know how much those notes can mean. Just don't overdo it, okay? Everything has its healthy and unhealthy doses, even good things. Patton nodded. They had all learned that the hard way, several times already. After a few moments, Alex shot Janice a questioning look over Patton's shoulder. Janice knew what was offered, but he couldn't accept. While he would love to hug the fusion as well, he didn't want to push Virgil's boundaries like that. Not after last time. Alex seemed to understand this and nodded with an appreciative smile. Then he gently pushed Patton back, and when the heart returned to his spot, Alex returned to his own form. He tucked away the last notes. The last notes. Does this mean? Janice asked. It means that next time I destabilize, I won't fight it. Could we go back up? I want them to be somewhere familiar when it happens. I don't know how this will affect them. They'll need you all to be there for them. Everyone nodded solemnly and sank out. Everyone except for Thomas. I don't get it. I don't feel more or less confident than minutes ago. Why? Your anxiety over them is still there. Meeting me hasn't addressed any issues you worried about before, and your passion is hard to contain, which isn't bad, but there is still a lot to do before they'll be able to choose to be me, and for me to choose to be them. And they need to be here too. I might be aware of limits, but I can't be as vigilant as Virgil. And I might have many suggestions, but I can't create like Roman. They are needed to do those tasks, and if they don't return soon, you'll start to notice this too. I'll be fine, Thomas. If you look after yourself, this isn't the last time you see me. Thomas took a shaky breath and then opened his eyes in his real living room. No! Wait! These exclamations came from the two newly separated sides. That was... Roman and Virgil gasped simultaneously, both at a loss for words after being one person for several days and suddenly being returned to just themselves. Hey, kiddos okay? Patton asked gently, knowing it was a stupid question. But what else was he supposed to say? Roman curled in on himself and leaned against his brother for support, who pretended not to notice. Virgil hid in his hoodie and sat down on the stairs. No, the anxious man sighed. But that is fine, right? Alex? He thought it was all right not to be okay, Roman almost pleaded. Of course it is, Thomas assured them both. You've both been through a lot, and I don't just mean fusing. I suggest we take a break, all right? I'll check in with the both of you later, when you feel ready. Just show up. I'll listen to whatever you have to say, Thomas promised. If I may, what was it like? Logan asked, unable to help himself any longer. His almost childlike wonder eased the tension in the room. One moment Roman and I are messing around with some ideas while dodging whatever Remus threw at us. You were doing most of the dodging, if we're honest, Roman offered fondly. We were rambling about all kinds of things, and suddenly a paint bomb hit us, and we laughed. And then we both said, "We're such a mess," he recalled as he jabbed his brother in the side. Next thing we know, we're an eye. It was... Virgil can't find the right words. It was everything he dreamed and feared all in one, and it was so much better than anything he'd ever done. And he knew Roman felt similarly. He'd felt how badly Roman had wanted Alexander to stay for just another minute whenever they glitched. Suddenly a wishing star and an origami butterfly fell from the sky, a parting gift from Alex. The sides opened their messages curiously and smiled. They looked up at each other and nodded, confirming a shared thought. It was amazing. I've never felt so certain, they said as one. Remus? Roman smiled gently as he straightened himself. Whatever his note had said clearly reignited his inner spark. Thank you for looking after him. You didn't allow him to go even a second without your support. We couldn't have wished for a better uncle for our boy, Roman stated, fondly running with Remus's claim on Alex as his nephew. You can be so cruel sometimes, Ro, Remus huffed dismissively. But as he sank out, he allowed a brief smile to grace his lips. Logan, Virgil piped up as he turned to look at the teacher through the bars of the railings.
You might not have known what was going on, but you respected our need for space and passed along our notes the whole time. Thank you. And seriously, don't take him not confiding in you personally. He might be pretty cool, but between me and Princey, his focus is pretty much non-existent. There's probably a ton of ask Logan about his notes he promptly forgot about. Logan nodded with a gentle smile. That's quite all right, Virgil, he assured them. I eagerly await your notes. For now, I'll collect my own findings and finish up my work. And with that, Logan left for his room.
Virgil, Roman,
Patton started softly, only for the two sides to flinch.
I'm sorry about how I reacted when we saw what Alex really was. He's such a wonderful person. I'm sorry I didn't get to hang out more. But I'm also glad to see you do as well. I get why Alex went to Logan. That's on me.
Padre, no! It isn't what you think. Patton looked up confused at that. Roman and Virgil were having a silent conversation. Roman pleading, Virgil reassuring. Eventually, Roman nodded and turned away from the others, studying the cuffs of his sleeves instead. Virgil sighed and spoke on their behalf. Alex was a little scared of how you would react to him. I can't deny that. But not for the reasons you think. He had no doubt he could win you over. Virgil couldn't help the fond smile at their fusion's determination to wow the others. But part of him felt like you'd be mad with us.
Oh, kiddo.
Not him, Patton. Janice interrupted with a hand to Patton's shoulder and a gentle nod towards Roman's dejected posture.
Why would I be mad with either of you?
Patton asked, confused. Roman flinched again and ducked away in shame. He thinks you're disappointed in him and fault him for me taking his side. Both of which are ridiculous, but I've run out of ways to try and make him see that ages ago. He didn't feel ready to face you when Alexander came around, and Alexander, well, either was doubt shown true to him, or he didn't want to push Roman too hard. You know, what with the whole might fall apart at a moment's notice thing. Patton deflated as he listened to Virgil's explanation. Then he turned to Roman with determination.
Now, you listen here, young man. Even if all of that was the case, I still love you kids, with everything I am.
He spoke with so much passion, it was impossible for Roman not to look up.
You lashed out at Janice, but Janice could have handled that situation better as well. You both made mistakes. I made mistakes. But we can work through all of those things together, as soon as you are ready. Okay?
Roman bit his lip as he fought back tears and nodded.
Okay. Don't push yourself, understood? You can be mad with Janice and me for as long as you need. And you do have reason to be mad at me, kiddo.
Patton insisted when he saw both Virgil and Roman were about to object.
And forcing all of the anger meant for what I did on Janice isn't fair to him, me, or yourselves. So be mad. Vent to each other, to Logan, Thomas, whatever it takes for you to let it all out. And then we can talk things out as a family later. How does that sound?
Roman and Virgil looked over at each other, and after another silent exchange they nodded. Okay, they both muttered. Patton gave them an appreciative smile as he too sank out. Janice, Virgil started, much to the shock of the recently accepted side. Thomas was simply beaming with pride at the youngest of his side. Virgil might be an angsty boy, but sometimes he could be the most wholesome baby of them all, and he could tell this was going to turn out to be one of those times. Thank you for not taking advantage of Alexander's, well, everything that made him okay with you hugging him, or whatever. I really appreciate that. Oui, Roman muttered reluctantly, still not looking at Janice, who was speechless. Oui. Virgil nodded in agreement, a proud smile towards his friend. Janice relaxed a little.
Maybe just this once, hope wasn't such a terrible lie to indulge in. Maybe this was one of those times when hope turned out to be close to the truth. He opened his mouth about to speak, but hesitated. He took off his right glove and showed his bare palm. "I'll give you both the time you need," he promised before sinking out. "So," Thomas breathed, finally letting everything sink in and turning to Virgil. "Before you two go, as I'm sure you two have a lot to talk about now, you know that I don't care about whatever happened in the past, right? What matters is who you are now. And now you are Virgil, my anxiety who's been trying so hard to cut me some slack. I have noticed you try to give the others more room to work, Virg, and I'm so proud of you." Virgil was at a loss for words. "Told you," Roman smiled carefully, still reeling from his most recent split. "And Roman," the prince stiffened as Thomas addressed him, "we'll figure this out together, okay, buddy? I'm sorry for all the pressure you must have been under. Hearing how Alex described you, it made me realize what kind of expectations you must have had for me. I thought those were addressed when we talked about being original, but clearly you hurt yourself to try and make me happy, and I'm still glad you showed me that I am not a self-serving—" Thomas struggled to find an appropriate term for a second, but couldn't think of anything that wouldn't make Patton pop back up to scold him. "Person, Janice unintentionally made me feel I was. Please don't think that your sacrifice was in vain. If nothing else, it showed me how far you are willing to go for me, and I will make an effort not to take that for granted ever again." Roman stood there, at a loss for words. "Told you," Virgil grinned teasingly. Roman chuckled, gave Thomas a brief bow in appreciation, and then turned and smiled back at the cautious man he'd shared a never before explored bond with. "Well, we should get a look at this new room. It seems there is quite a task ahead of us," he announced. Virgil nodded and gave Thomas a salute. Thomas turned to the camera to give his outro, though he wasn't sure if he would try to film the whole thing. "Well, that was a ride. I hope this helped you all to understand what it means to be truly confident. Now, until next time, take it easy, guys, gals, and non-binary balls. Peace out."